Irina Heaver and Joe Rubin. Um, Irina, Joe, before we go ahead and get started, give us a quick background of who you are and how you got into crypto law to begin with.
Ladies first.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Irina, and I am a lawyer. I split my time between Dubai, which is positioning itself as the crypto capital of the world, and Switzerland, which has actually proven to be the crypto capital of the world with the Swiss Crypto Valley hosting all of the major foundations, starting from Ethereum and finishing with the latest foundations. Prior to me joining crypto industry in 2016, I was an oil and gas lawyer working for national oil and gas companies throughout the Middle East, throughout all sorts of wonderful locations such as Algeria and Libya and Pakistan, Afghanistan, so Iraq as well. So I'm quite happy to be now based in less exotic countries, and I'm a partner in a law firm, and we represent clients all over the world that are building in the crypto, digital assets, blockchain space. And thank you so much for having me, Whale Coin Talk.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And Joe, give us a quick background, sir.
Sure. Quite impressive, Irina. Excellent. Myself, just humbly practicing in the U.S. Had my own firm since 2015, at which time I really dove into the legal side of crypto and blockchain, as well as cannabis and hemp, but that's another story for another day. Practiced out of Denver, Colorado. Helped a bunch of companies, probably about 50 to 60 at this point in the crypto space, set up globally over the years, and work in compliance and regulation, as well as business and tax structuring for said companies. So, got in early, really saw the need for the, sound legal advice and, and lawyers in the space that understood what they were doing. So that's how I got in.
Awesome. Well, both very different, but also respectable backgrounds. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm going to jump right into it. Irina, let's start with you first. At a high level, can you give us an overview of what exactly crypto law is? I know it's a very broad answer, but I would love to hear from your own words, kind of what you think when you hear those words.
Some may say that there is no such thing as crypto law, there is no such thing as a blockchain law, and I may agree with them, because this really, if you look across the world in various jurisdictions, there's very, very little in terms of actual laws that got passed, and there's even less in terms of precedents, right? For example, our favorite SEC is trying to create precedent by enforcing laws that there are none against certain companies, but as such there's very, very little body of law or body of precedent around the world. So when I say crypto law, I'll tell you what I mean when I say crypto law. I mean a collection of sort of contractual, corporate, governance, and all sorts of other, as well as financial services, or as you call it in the US, security laws. In Europe, we call it financial services laws. So it's a collection of all sorts of laws in various areas of laws that apply to crypto company. For example, let's take a crypto exchange as an example. What kind of laws and regulations and other sort of contractual commercial issues will apply to an exchange? You have employees, right? So employment law will kick in when dealing with employment issues. You also have those employees, for example, receiving equity, sweat equity in a company. So some sort of securities laws will come in as well, how that equity is distributed. Then you have various contractors that are providing you with technology, or let's say even a marketing contractor, right? So a contractual law will come into place because you have to conclude contracts with all those parties. So and that's what I mean, crypto law. When basically a collection of various things as they come, for the full required operation of a crypto company. So, and of course, various lawyers may interpret things very differently, but you will rarely find two lawyers that will agree on something. So I'm sure Joseph will have a very different definition.
Honestly, that was really well put. I do have that unique perspective as CEO of a crypto exchange as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. And what I do day to day as a C-level management of my crypto exchange is very different, and even as part of the in-house counsel, of course, for the exchange, is very different than what I would do for my law firm or my other lawyers that I've pretty much given the law firm over to. Would do on a day-to-day. I think it is a blend, as Irina said, of securities, business and tax structuring law, compliance, globally, of course, for our exchange, since it is a global exchange, and really keeping abreast of what every country in the world is doing at all times, because crypto precedent and regulatory landscape changes every 5 minutes, and then that's not a joke or an exaggeration. So what does a crypto lawyer, a blockchain lawyer do? They do the best that they can with what they have in a given jurisdiction, day to day. And that is really, kind of what we do, right? I help work on multiple states legislation, as well as federal legislation in the US as an advisor and as a drafter. And I think that we try to put guidelines in place that will stem these regulatory bodies, such as the SEC, which you brought up, from regulation by enforcement, and put guidelines in place. But it's a very slow process since it's a new asset class, and it really doesn't fit in the same in the same environment or sandbox as any other asset class we've ever seen. So regulation is slow to develop, is slow to establish regulatory frameworks, because no two agencies can agree on what's going on, even in the same jurisdiction, and how to classify these assets. And it's just a hodgepodge of what we do on a day-to-day. So I absolutely agree.
Okay,
Great.
that was quite unusual, but a good start for two lawyers to agree on something.
Well, that leads me to my next question. And Irina, I'm going to start with you on this one. You mentioned practicing law between Switzerland and Dubai, and I'm curious to know if you've noticed any major differences between how crypto law is regulated.
All right, so there are a couple of things. First, a lawyer always notes when a lawyer is hired or a lawyer is sort of trying to describe them. As a lawyer, you're admitted in a certain jurisdiction to practice law. I'm an Australian lawyer. I'm admitted to practice in Australia by fact that it's a common law jurisdiction. And I work for a UK firm, UK publicly listed firm. So we practice in UK as well. Now, because I'm based in Dubai, there is a process in Dubai for a lawyer to be admitted into practice in Dubai, which I am as well, by the fact that I'm a common law lawyer. However, I cannot go to courts in Dubai or represent a client in a court because I'm not an advocate under the UAE laws, because basically it's a very boring administrative procedure that every lawyer has to comply. And the reason we have to comply with this because, for the protection of our clients. And lawyers being a lawyer is a very, very regulated profession. For the protection of the clients, because same as doctors is a very regulated profession for the protection of the patients. So when we advise our clients, one of the things that we are of course very mindful is that countries have borders and jurisdictions have borders. For example, Dubai has their own laws, but also UAE has their own laws and Dubai is a part of UAE. There's a federal law and a state law, and there's always, so you have to be mindful of that. Now, Switzerland, for example, they have their own federal rules and regulations and laws, as well as each canton in Switzerland has their own laws. So when we advise our clients, we are quite mindful mindful that we only advise in the jurisdictions that we can as a law firm. And also, we are mindful that countries have borders, but crypto does not have borders. When you operate, for example, an exchange, you don't want your exchange to be only be offering services, let's say in Switzerland. That would be quite useless, right? You want your exchange to be offering services worldwide. So we don't really focus on a particular country or a particular jurisdiction unless licensing comes into place. We focus mainly, like our job, a job as a crypto lawyer, your job is to look at the client's business case and advise them how they can operate in as many jurisdictions as humanly, physically, and legally possible. That's the sort of trick. So I don't really focus on, okay, so here's the laws in Switzerland, let's comply with that. Here's the law in Dubai, let's comply with that. The focus is the opposite. The focus is, here's your company, here's your business case. Let's see how you can operate as globally as possible, if that answers the question.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I can see what you mean by having certain restrictions in one country and having certain laws in another country, and how it becomes so nuanced across borders. Joe, you are someone who has practiced across state lines here in the U.S. and I'm assuming in other countries as well. Taking that question and removing Switzerland and Dubai and kind of putting in the jurisdictions that you have practiced in. What are your thoughts on that? What kind of nuances and differences do you see?
Oh God, yeah, the SEC is heavily nuanced. I rule with an iron fist. No, I'm dead serious. It's very different in the U.S. Running a global exchange is interesting out of the U.S. with a U.S. parent company and a Seychelles domicile, because the Seychelles domicile was, tactically set up a few years ago to give us access to areas such as the EU and Asia and Australia and other jurisdictions where it is legal, as Irina was saying, to operate, right? There have been some countries that have scaled back or scaled up, regulatory requirements. And we do work through those country by country when they do pop up. A good example that you're seeing of this is Binance going through really what they've gone through is regulatory hell the last year or two, with jurisdiction after jurisdiction, forcing them to comply with their regulatory bodies. Of course, Binance has so many billions of dollars, it's okay. They're able to beef up their legal team and get it done in a timely manner, and they that's a great thing for them to be able to do. Now, it really is, as Irina said, more regulation by area. And we do try to fit our exchange, for example, or a company that our law firm might work with that is a global company, and see how many jurisdictions we can plop them into where crypto is legal, where it's legal to transact with digital assets, and where it is, there's a distinction between a security, a commodity, and a utility type token like there is in the US, since all companies are not the same with their token use cases, tokens they mint, and their stated business goals. I also do think that the US is far behind its EU and Asian counterparts because of the way they have decided to go about implementing regulation. And it's very frustrating to go and speak with and the SEC on a legal matter and kind of educate them really at times as to what's going on in the cryptoverse, because we've been in it and we eat, sleep, and breathe it day to day, whereas the regulatory agent you may be working with may be freshly new into digital assets, into crypto, and it's an education process, right? There's a yin and a yang to that, where you see the more experienced regulators that are sort of now being hired as additional crypto advisors. I mean, look at Biden just passed a crypto advisor, position for the White House, and I love that. That should have been on the White House staff in the last presidency, but I'm glad it's getting done. There's a learning curve, as we all know. There's a steep learning curve on the legal side for crypto, and things change so fast that it's very tough to keep up. I have two or three law clerks full time that just keep up with regulation on a global scale. So it really does matter, region to region, what regulatory bodies put out what advisories, what statements, what precedent, and it will vary. Very much so. It'll vary worldwide on a global scale.
Well, this moves into my next question. And Irina, I want to start with you again. What do you think are the biggest regulatory barriers to mass adoption?
Mass adoption of what?
It's a good question. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, Bitcoin as a legal tender.
So a couple of things. I don't think Bitcoin has to be a legal tender for it to be adopted by the masses, because Bitcoin is already being adopted by the masses without it being a legal tender. For example, in Switzerland, where I live, a city of Lugano has decided that Bitcoin will be a medium of exchange at par with Swiss franc. And I think there's only one country to date, El Salvador, where Bitcoin is the legal tender. So I don't think we need government. I mean, we all can think for ourselves, hopefully. So I don't think we need governments to tell us what is a legal tender and what is not a legal tender. Humans naturally gravitate towards sound and save money. For example, in the Middle East, there are so many countries that are absolutely destroyed by inflation. For example, Lebanon, Turkey, and there are several countries that were excluded from the international commerce. For example, Iran, and there are several countries that are absolutely destroyed by war. So people in those countries, whichever, if they have some additional money, or they manage to earn something, they don't save it in their own currency. They save it in Bitcoin, they save it in USDT, they save it in some sort of a stable coin as well, or Bitcoin. So for 570 million people in the Middle East, and those who have some spare cash, they save it in Bitcoin and in other cryptocurrencies, which which is available for them, or which they decided to do. So we don't need governments, and of course, no Lebanese government is telling the Lebanese citizens to not to use the Lebanese currency, but instead save their savings in Bitcoin. Of course, on contrary, the governments are trying to crack down on all sorts of foreign exchanges and all sorts of other means of exiting the failed currency, which is the Lebanese pound. So my point is, humans naturally gravitate towards safer and sound currency. But of course, in crypto, there's a lot of issues, such as technology issues. For example, you and I can read, we're very well educated, but for those who are not as well as educated, and for those who don't really have access to, because a lot of information about Bitcoin and crypto is in English as well. So let's say English is not your even third or fourth language, because we have a lot of we have a lot of people who speak 3, 4, 5 languages. So it's not even your fourth language, let's say. So you're not able to go online and to read information about cryptocurrencies, about Bitcoin. So you basically just do not know. So education. If I were, I would name education as a number one reason why there's still barriers to mass adoption. That's one. And secondly, of course, the technological know-how. For example, my mom in her 60s, she would not be saving her savings in cryptocurrencies, because she's not as digitally native as, for example, my nephew, who is 10 years old. For him, like, I don't think that in his lifetime he would have a bank account. Why would he need to do that? He has a smartphone even now, so in a few years time, when he has some spare cash, he'll be saving it in crypto, right? Or he'll be using crypto to transact with his friends. So I think we will get to that mass adoption, definitely, and definitely not through the governments.
Beautiful. Joe?
Oh my gosh, how do I top that? First off, Lugano is my favorite city in Switzerland, so thank you for mentioning that. I've been there 3 or 4 times in my life, and I love it. And I'm very happy to see cities and other jurisdictions, like that, basically legalizing Bitcoin specifically and hopefully other crypto moving forward as different tokens stabilize as currencies. To your point, you did mention a lot of governmental oppression that leads to adoption by communities of citizens, by regional groups of citizens as currency. And I think we are seeing that not only among citizens that are, kind of ditching failed currencies, but also countries such as Venezuela, such as El Salvador. We're seeing, obviously we're seeing it in Ukraine right now since it's a war-torn country, a lot of people are turning to crypto, and other similar jurisdictions. It doesn't always have to be Central African Republic just made crypto Bitcoin a currency, I believe, as well. And we're seeing it not only from localized countries, but we're seeing it on a global scale, and I do think this will continue. Now, it's a different perspective in the U.S., of course, because the United States has a relatively strong currency system, right? We've seen its failings and its limitations over the last few years with the the Fed money printers, obviously printing trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars quarterly to fight inflation in a failed attempt to fight inflation, I guess, or but really causing inflation, and failed attempt to fight COVID more accurately. And I think the more that things of that nature happen, the more people, like you said, do turn to sound, safe, and reliable money. The U.S. is, of course, on the forefront of trying to aggressively regulate, in part, I believe, because they are trying to save the fiat financial system. And I think that's definitely a different perspective than what you get, especially in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, where there's not as much wealth to be distributed, in many countries and in many cases. And we do see these failed governmental, attempts at currency, right? So it's just a totally different perspective. But I do think that mass adoption, of course, is coming. And I do think it will be through stables and Bitcoin and probably Ethereum first, and the major tokens. Of course, XRP is a payment processor as well. That's what it's there for. But I think that on a global scale, the next 5 to 10 years are going to be very telling as more and more countries not only legalize, crypto, but really fully, truly adopt it as a currency option for their banking systems, their populace, and their governments. So I'm definitely keeping an eye out on that.
And that's a great point that you made. Depending where you're from, and depending on your sort of access to things, Bitcoin is a different thing to different people. I assume you have a bank account. I assume you have several credit cards, so you are fully banked, as far as a Westerner concerned. But if you look at an average person in the Middle East, less than 14% of the population, 1/4, is banked. Firstly, their country might be in ruins because of war. Secondly, they might be a woman who is not allowed to open a bank account unless a male guardian comes with her to a bank, which is quite still the situation in some countries. Or you could really not have shoes to go to a bank to open a bank account, or you don't have the papers to go to a bank to open a bank account because you might be a refugee who was running for their lives. So less than 14% of the Middle Eastern population out of 570 million people are banked. So of course, for people like that, Bitcoin is totally different thing than for people who are very well off in a Western society and have access to all sorts of financial instruments. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Because Bitcoin can be so many different things for so many different people. There's no one use case. There are many use cases. For example, people in Palestine are not allowed to go to a bank to open a bank account for various political reasons. So their cousins who work in the US, their cousins who work in the Canada, they send them help. They're helping their families by sending them crypto, because all you need to have access to a wallet, you just need a $50 smartphone, and we've got plenty of those in the Middle East. I think on average, an average Middle Easterner has two devices for the family. So it's quite, high penetration. So, and that's, I think, for exchanges or for crypto payment institutions, I think Middle East is a completely untapped potential, and I'm looking forward to more and more companies moving in and also educating people in their native language and in their native environment. The first Bitcoin meetup I had in Dubai in 2014, one person came. So this person told me I'm crazy and told me, what is this bullshit, crazy internet money you are talking about? The last Bitcoin meetup I had in Dubai, 9,000 people came. That was in March this year. So you see, it takes a really, really long time, an awful amount of work, but we're getting there slowly but surely. That's the thing, right? You just want to see the progress. So I'm absolutely convinced we'll get there slowly but surely.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up. Education is such a big piece of of understanding crypto, because I remember the first time I was making transactions, almost 9 years ago at this point. I went to a Bitcoin ATM and I lost $2,500, which at the time I think was about 8 Bitcoin. It was, and it was a sobering experience. I had to go. Thankfully, I had funds to go do it again, but I put in a 0 instead of an O, and there was no recourse for that back then. And I think the education piece, understanding how malleable crypto is as an asset class and transactionally friendly it is, and how low the fees are. I mean, this is replacing things such as Western Union, such as, money orders, things of that nature, which are, really relatively high fee transactional devices or wires. And if you can send crypto for a few cents versus, tens if not hundreds of dollars for your transaction, that makes everybody's life a heck of a lot easier, especially if they can't get to a bank and they do have a smartphone, like you said. So thank you.
Great. Well, lots to unpack there. Irina, I can certainly see the use cases of crypto and Bitcoin in the Middle East, having spent a small portion of my life out there, my parents being from that region. I know exactly what you're talking about. I think that I conflated, maybe it was on my end, mass adoption with regulation. And I'm curious now to know what you both think needs to happen in order for regulation to, and I guess happening on a global scale is kind of hard to say, but in countries that are leaders, that are currently leaders in the world, there's a short talk with Kevin O'Leary, and he talks about why regulation is so important and how 90% of wealth is held by sovereign and pension plans who own zero crypto, and many of them would allocate 50 to 100 basis points to Bitcoin and crypto if they could, but they just can't. So I'm curious to know what you think needs to happen for that amount of wealth to flow into this industry, because I do think it's important for a lot of this money that's still on the sidelines to be given the green light and ultimately enter our space.
Do you want to go, Joseph? Because I'm a little bit, I'm
Sure.
one of those anti-regulation person.
Yeah, no problem. What I think needs to happen, and what we're seeing is so much regional regulation around the globe that I think it is going to continue in that fashion for quite a while as, as more and more countries get on board, more and more regulatory bodies catch up to what's going on and really truly understand the asset class as a whole better. I think there needs to be some sort of consensus where a framework is set up, a global framework. I mean, we live in a global economy. Our supply chain that's what blockchain is. It's the digital ledger technology. It's basically a global technology that needs to be globally uniform in some sense, because we have so much fragmented regulation and fragmented, hierarchy of oversight right now that there's no consensus when you transact between one domicile and another domicile. It doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of confusion because of that and hesitation because of that. We saw it back in the day with China and South Korea switching off bans every month, for what seemed like years. on crypto. They banned it, they'd not ban it. India jumped in for a while, banned it, not banned it. I mean, it was just nuts. But until we have that framework on a global scale, it's really hard to see a lot of already wealthy individuals, taking a leap into the asset class, of course, unless they understand it, unless they're tech moguls or they have some kind of, kind of hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, or something to gain from it. I think that, that stat is very jarring, that 90% of the wealth there doesn't have access to or doesn't want to access, crypto. I do think there's a lot more options now with, IRAs, crypto IRAs and pension plans and things of that nature, where people can roll a substantial amount of money into crypto that they have saved up. I mean, Fidelity offers it, eToro offers it. A lot of major financial companies offer these plans. So it is out there. It's just going back to the education piece, where a lot of these, people that have accumulated wealth need to be educated on what they're investing in, and so they feel comfortable doing it. So, I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take really good global communication, which is sorely lacking, right now, just on a global scale for anything, really, but especially this asset class. And it's going to take regulators, putting aside their egos and working together to form a framework that works for the individual investor, for companies of all sizes, for exchanges, and for those who are more wealthy and have been in the industry for a long time to come together and work as an asset class.
Right on. So moving on, Irina, Joe, can you give us your high-level thoughts on central bank digital currencies and, the good, the bad, if any, and do you think that these are going to be something that are implemented eventually?
CBDCs are definitely coming. It's not a question of if or but it's a question of when. They're definitely coming, and for us as citizens of this planet or citizens of those countries, that would be so bad. Just think about it. Over the last couple of years, when all these COVID restrictions were implemented, 100% of those restrictions were proven to be detrimental to society, detrimental to kids, detrimental to adults. 100% of those restrictions and things that governments imposed on us, and they still did that. And if you didn't comply, then there were all sorts of horrible consequences for individuals. So imagine, so just remember, in North America, remember the Canadian truckers protesting and their bank accounts were being seized. Imagine if Canada at the time already had the CBDC, and I'm talking about the retail CBDC, where you as a Canadian citizen have a wallet, and all your Canadian dollars are in that wallet. It just takes one click of a button to switch off your wallet, right? Or if you dared to, in Australia where I'm from, they implemented a 5-kilometer radius, or 2-kilometer radius, that you cannot leave your neighborhood. And imagine you left your neighborhood, and your wallet is geo-fenced, so you can't even pay for a taxi to return back home, and all sorts of horrible sort of Black Mirror scenario. And I mean, that's just awful. I think we all should realize how dangerous CBDCs are for our freedom and for our personal liberties, and we should fight against that by means of approaching your government sort of representatives, or if you live in Switzerland, where is a direct democracy, so we've got a referendum on everything. Every 2 weeks we have a referendum. So I'm definitely getting all my neighbors to vote against CBDCs. And also we have the good thing about Switzerland, we all have rifles at home, so the government is actually quite mindful before implementing laws and regulations that the citizens don't like, because every single able-bodied men have to go to army service, and when they finish with the army service, they return home with their rifle. And of course, when my husband returned home with his rifle, he got me one as well, because why not? It's more fun when there's two rifles at home. So since then, we've got even more. So we're quite, in Switzerland, we're quite determined to protect our freedom and liberties with rifles or with referendums or otherwise. So I am very, very, very much so against CBDCs, but of course, in those countries where rifles are not available or there is no referendums, Bitcoin is the answer, right? Bitcoin is a decentralized currency, and it's the answer against the CBDCs. Israel, for example, just last week outlawed transactions above, from top of my head, I think like $2,000 worth of transactions in cash. So if you are transacting with anybody above a certain amount, and the limit is actually very, very small, then you have to do it via bank transfers, because the governments are fighting against all this sort of cash transactions, because the governments want to know. I think in the US, there was some sort of a proposal that anything above $600, any transaction above $600 has to be reported, right? And Joseph, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, if it was implemented or it was just discussed. And then we have, wonderful ladies like Nancy Pelosi conducting all sorts of insider trading through her family members, and absolutely nobody can say anything, right? Because, if you're not caught, then it means you're okay. So that's what I absolutely cannot stand when it comes to things imposed by the governments. There's rules for them, and there's rules for us as normal individuals that are trying to mind their business and live our lives. And I'll stop my libertarian rants here, and I'll let Joseph, be more balanced in his views towards regulations.
I'm not going to be much more balanced towards CBDCs. I think they're at heart a way for the government to track transactions. Even more so than they already do in the digital age, where most transactions are conducted and are freely visible via debit or credit cards. And I do think that there is a lot of uncertainty and around how CBDCs are going to be implemented. And I do think there's going to be a lot of pushback if governments kind of try to ram it down their constituents' throats. I'm more on the progressive side than libertarian. But I like progress, right? That's why I love this asset class. It's not a political statement. I like progress in all fields, and I want humans to develop as a species, as much as possible. And I think this asset class furthers that. But I think CBDCs are going to set us back at the end of the day, because it does take away your financial freedom. It's a very centralized, even more so than now, digital asset class that will be fully tracked. Everybody's wallets, like you said, if you are restricted to a region, COVID was a perfect example. You can't have that happen because, if you're restricted regionally and you can't access your wallet outside of a region that you're not supposed to be in, how are you supposed to freely move around or get home if there's a curfew in place or something of that matter? It doesn't make sense. And I think certain countries will push it through more so than others. But I don't think it's going to be a global phenomenon until regulatory bodies and governments understand crypto better and understand digital assets better. So I think it's going to be a slow process, and there's going to be a lot of change and discussion and alteration from what it looks like in its current form, at least in the US, when some of the legislature we worked on just at least briefly discussed it. I work with legislators that are on the other side of the fence that are very pro crypto and have their voices heard in the Senate, such as Tom Emmer. I'm on the board of directors for the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, and that's our state, our state body to help assist legislators draft legislation and things of that nature. But we work on the other side of the fence to really promote the financial freedom of individuals and companies, like I was saying before, and really take a hardline stance against CBDCs as well. So I'm definitely on that side of the fence.
Amen. And, Irina, I certainly agree that it's not a matter of if, It's a matter of when. Joe, I couldn't agree more as well that it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. That said, CBDCs scare the crap out of me. I think that for obvious reasons, the idea of a central entity being able to control the mass majority of the population's wealth, and like you said, Irina, switch it on and off at a flick of a button is just very dystopian, kind of 1984 Black Mirror, and it, I don't want to get too, I don't want to go on my sci-fi rant rabbit hole, but I do think that this is something we need to be cognizant of, and I'd be curious to know what both of you think as far as what the individual is able to do in order to push back on this. Irina, you said that in Switzerland you're getting your neighbors to vote against it, push back against it. But Joe, on a global scale, and we'll start with Joe and then go to Irina on this one. What do you think needs to happen? Rather, not at a global scale, but as citizens of the West, what do you think we need to do in order to, as an individual, fight against this? Because I really do think that CBDCs are awful for our progress as a species.
Well, I think Irina hit it on the head before, is stay in contact, close contact with your local Congress people or local politicians, legislators that can influence these decisions, or at least, help amend them to something that's more palatable. Like I was saying, I work with the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, as well as a state's plural legislative body on that board of directors as well, to kind of guide legislation and guide proactive crypto and blockchain legislation around the U.S. And I think our input is vital. To be a leader in this space, you don't have to have a wealth of experience, but I would say you should have a good knowledge base, and you should bring clear, well-represented, well-presented ideas to your local congressmen and representatives when you go to them and present, because haphazard arguments and things that are all over the place don't work, right? But if something is well laid out, clear and easy to digest, and it's in part understood and implemented. So it's very important that the leaders in our space do band together, and there are plenty of advocacy groups that do this to form kind of coalitions against CBDC implementation, or at least shaping it so that it's not this mandatory requirement that tracks all citizens. So I think those are a few things that you can do on the more local scale, and go to your crypto meetups, go to your blockchain meetups, just engage with leaders in your state or your region or your country. And I think that's an important thing to note, that everybody on this call can do something. Everybody on this space can do something.
Yes, absolutely. Lobbying through basically citizen initiatives, that's a good thing. But if you, for example, not a confrontational person and you don't want to get involved with that, then bail out from that system by going into Bitcoin, right? They cannot centralize Bitcoin. It's too late already. And I mean Bitcoin like BTC, not some other versions of Bitcoin that there was a recent judgment, I think as recent as 2 days ago. There's an Australian national that is claiming to be Satoshi, and he's claiming that his version of Bitcoin is the real Bitcoin. And they started bashing me under my Twitter post, so I did a quick research. Something less than 5 nodes are now maintaining BSV. So just stick with BTC. Do not go into any other sort of forks, because BTC is decentralized. So yeah, bail out from that system completely, and to the extent you can get involved, get involved. That's all we can do. It took 2 years for us to get out of this pandemic by forcing, there were so many protests, and there's so many protests happening in Europe right now, which you're not gonna read on the news because the revolution is not being televised. So I think the same with the financial services, the same with our money. The revolution is happening, and it's definitely not being televised.
Yeah, and just my thoughts on that last point, Irina. I think that the more time goes on, the more the younger generation is going to move away from legacy media outlets in order to get their information, and they're going to move more towards the internet and hopefully a decentralized way of sharing news where there's transparency and people can actually see what's going on across the globe without it being filtered or without it being biased, let's say. So moving on.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to that. Exactly. I mean, podcasters like Joe Rogan has something like 100 times the audience of CNBC and CNN and all of those channels that should just, stop wasting their lives and just shut down. But then it also makes it dangerous as well, right? It's a double-edged sword. You have somebody well-meaning, let's say, like Joe Rogan, because all he does is ask questions, and then you might have somebody quite not well-meaning, like those YouTube influencers that are shilling all sorts of shitcoins, for the lack of a better term, right? So it's a double-edged sword. You have to be careful who you listen to, because at the moment, and as we've seen with the war in Ukraine, what is happening is a huge sort of digital war, and Russia and Ukraine are basically fighting each other digitally, who can lie most, right? Because they accuse each other of the same horrible incidents that somebody's perpetrating against a peaceful population. So that's becoming quite dangerous situation as well. And honestly, I do not know how it's 1984 all over again. Today we're told this, and tomorrow we're told exactly the opposite, and we're supposed, and like, how stupid are people really buying all of that? But that's a bit detracting from our conversation.
No, not at all. I love these tangents, sort of, and I do think that they relate back to the original topic of what we're discussing. Just one last note: these long format podcasts, I do genuinely believe, are going to be the way people get information more and more going into the future. But like you said, Irina, these are a double-edged sword, and you have to make sure you know and you trust who you're getting that information from, where they're sourcing the information from, all that good stuff. Irina, Joe, I want to not really shift gears, but move on to a different topic, or another topic rather. What is your take on the Coinbase insider trading scandal involving, I believe it's Ishan Wahi and two others? And if the perpetrators are found guilty, does that technically make cryptocurrencies securities?
Okay, let me address the second question first. No, some cryptos are securities, some are commodities, some are straight utility tokens. It depends what your use case is for your cryptocurrency token, right? Those tokens that have a reasonable tie to dividends, some kind of equity in a company, or some kind of security-like feature are securities by nature. That does include, I will give a word of warning, decentralized finance rewards tokens and platform type tokens. That also does include NFTs that offer staking benefits and dividends for ownership. And those are the next couple areas that the US is going after real heavily. So we're going to see a lot of regulatory changes in the decentralized and NFT spaces over the next 12 to 24 months, if not sooner. Just a word of caution for anybody launching projects or associated with those projects. Make sure you get a good attorney that knows what they're doing, please. Now, that being said, there are those tokens that just have uses in their ecosystem as either forms of payment or functionality, such as, a good example is our MDX token. Granted, we're geofenced out of the US, so we're not under any securities laws anyway, because we have no US users, but the token itself is a utility token that offers rebates, rewards, and things of that nature, but doesn't serve a purpose, as a security at all. It's a straight utility token. So it's a good example. That being said, yeah, there may be some legs to the Coinbase insider trading case there, and Coinbase has acted accordingly and delisted those 9 assets and are looking into it. The problem that is overarching is that the SEC really the CFTC is better at working with companies and individuals on a one-on-one basis, and I found that to be true in my interaction with them. And they really do have a better interest at heart. I won't say best interest, but better interest than the SEC, especially under our good friend Gary Gensler. But what we're seeing is this regulation by enforcement that no one knows what the hell a security definition is in the U.S. So it's really best guess until you hopefully never have an enforcement decree or an adjudication handed down upon you. So until we can get out of that mode, I think Coinbase has done what they are supposed to do in that situation and delist those pairs and freeze those assets until there's some clarity around it. And, it's going to be interesting to see what the SEC does with that case, because it's going to set precedent.
Right on. And Irina, I know that you don't practice in the US, and so Joe probably has more insight into this, but I would be curious to know what your thoughts are on the whole scandal.
So I had the pleasure of litigating against SEC and DOJ. It was a 7-year case against a Swiss oil and gas company. So the way SEC operates, and again, I am these are my views as a European lawyer who had the pleasure of being involved in that litigation. So the way they operate is that they issue those industry sweep letters, as they call them. So, hey, let's send a letter to everybody in, let's say, a telecommunications industry. Let's send a letter to everybody in the oil and gas industry. And we were one of those, everybody in the oil and gas industry who received a letter, and the letter said, hey guys, are you doing anything dodgy? I'm paraphrasing, of course. Hey guys, are you doing anything dodgy? If you're doing dodgy, let us know, and you must sort of respond. And of course, we responded, no, of course not, we're not doing anything dodgy. But there are also incentives to self-report. So I believe that the Coinbase, there was some extent of self-reporting involved, and the SEC basically tells you, if you come clean, if it tells all, shows all your dirty underwear, then we will be very nice to you, and we will help you, which of course they don't. So that oil and gas company got caught in that industry sort of sweep letters, and the litigation took place for almost 7 years. And of course, you settle with SEC. Everybody just settles, because otherwise you cannot do business. Otherwise, you cannot just carry on with your life. It took all of the company resources. They basically came in. They took our computers and all of that. It was just crazy. I was a very young lawyer at the time, so for me that was a wonderful experience. So the only people happy in the SEC litigation are the lawyers, because you get so much experience. You get to fly business class to DC, and you get to enjoy the wonderful DC sort of nature. That was beautiful. And then at the end of that case, the company did not admit to anything, but settled $250+ million just to get SEC off our backs. This is my experience how SEC operates. So I would not be surprised if they start operating in a similar manner with the crypto industry. And Joe already mentioned that his exchange is geofenced out of the US. Every single project that I'm advising is geofenced out of the US, and no US investors can sort of participate. So basically what US is doing is just regulating themselves out of innovation, regulating themselves out of this industry, all in the name of investor protection. Again, I can understand why they're doing it, because who doesn't want $250 million of free money? But it's all done in the name of investor protection, which I do not believe. So yes, it's a quite interesting time to observe that. And look, European governments are not doing any better. There was a huge debacle about hosted and unhosted wallets and how they were planning to ban all the unhosted wallets. And it was just, we were openly mocking our EU regulators. We were open, there were industry letters sent to them saying, you know, guys, you are the only result that you will achieve right now is that you will regulate yourself out of this industry. And where will this company go? They'll go to Dubai, they'll go to Seychelles, they'll go to all other sort of offshore jurisdictions. Even Singapore, who are historically quite, the Singapore Monetary Authority are quite historically against all sorts of, you know, crypto projects setting up in Singapore. Even Singapore Monetary Authority recently came out saying, hey, crypto projects, we're here, because they see the opportunity. They see they see that there's an opportunity in having innovative businesses domiciled in their jurisdiction. So unfortunately, that's what we're seeing.
Wow, fantastic. So, for time purposes, I want to move on to the next question, which is, in what ways have either of you, Irina or Joe, seen crypto used in corporate transactions and M&A transactions?
Sure, I can start on this one. There's a couple of very innovative ways that we've seen not just crypto but NFTs used in the corporate world, in the retail world. I've helped set up some projects and advise on some projects that have used NFTs for fractional ownership of real estate, of real world goods, luxury goods. I've also advised on projects where NFTs are actually used for fractional ownership of precious metals mines, which is really interesting because, you know, those are two of the asset classes kind of combined together that people typically see as safe havens from fiat. I've also seen, of course, larger transactions take place between, you know, hemp and cannabis companies in crypto, not so much for anonymity purposes, but because it's a lot easier for regulatory purposes, crossing state lines with, you know, sending Bitcoin or sending Ethereum or sending stablecoin rather than sending cash that you brought in from a primarily cash business such as a cannabis or hemp business, even if it's legal, which it is, of course, in most states in the US. I'm only going to work on the legal side of that with legal, legitimate companies. But we see a lot of those transactions, and those have been some of the more innovative ways, you know, that we've seen crypto used. Obviously, other companies do, like, you know, you see your Teslas, your Apples, your, you know, major companies of the world buy millions, if not billions, in crypto and just keep it on their books as a balance and as a ledger balance, as an asset, right? Because they believe it's going to be an appreciable asset. And of course, hedge funds, mutual funds are starting to, you know, bigger banks are starting to stockpile some of their reserves in crypto, even if it's a small amount, because they also understand that the future is with these digital assets and with this digital asset class, and that adoption continues to only go one way. So that's some of the ways I've seen.
So in the M&A transactions that we acted, where a crypto company is acquiring another crypto company, the transaction was, of course, made in crypto because it makes sense. And you wouldn't see a crypto native who would be, you know, dying to go to a bank to fill out the wire transfer form, or God knows what they're doing now, because I haven't been to a bank in such a long time. I actually do not know what's happening now. So that is becoming more and more common, as well as individual, you know, wealthy individual or wealthy family offices, and we have a lot of wealthy family offices in the Middle East. So wealthy family offices are acquiring miners in crypto and then setting them up and, you know, mining more Bitcoin. That is happening a lot in the Middle East. And also, there was a funny maxi bidding, Saudis are maxi bidding thing trending on Twitter, and people were messaging me, you know, what's happening in Saudi, and it was just an NFT project that was just trying to attract attention to themselves. But it is actually the case, you know, wealthy Arabs are putting some of their family office's net worth in crypto. And I think there was a prince of Serbia who came out the other day saying, "Oh, there's a government in the Middle East that is about to put some of their reserves in Bitcoin," and people all got excited. And my bet is that that government is Dubai, because Dubai is positioning themselves as the crypto capital of the world, and we all see whatever Dubai uh, plans that happens, because there's just so much will to be innovative, because they don't have an option. Dubai does not have oil, Dubai does not have gas, Abu Dhabi has that. So the only option for Dubai to stay as wealthy as they are at the moment is to push for innovation and to attract those innovative technologies. So my bet is that in Q1 next year, we will see Dubai announcing that they are holding some of their government reserves in Bitcoin, or maybe some other currency, depending what they will see as more beneficial for their people.
Wow, hearing you talk about that makes me so excited for the future of this industry, and I hope that more governments and countries follow suit. Irina, Joe, I want to get into the Terra Luna scandal, what you both think it means for stablecoins and the rest of the industry, and also I want to package these two questions together. Do you think that all of these exchange and CeFi bankruptcies will serve as a catalyst for regulation?
Yes, very much so. So first of all, with Terra, it's hard to know which entities, and there are larger entities for sure, engineered the Terra collapse, because they definitely found a fatal flaw with these algorithmic, stable coins. As of yet, it's clear from the Terra incident, they don't work, and they're not stable enough to work unless they have a huge market cap. I would think in the 9 to 10 figure range. I'm sorry, like 11 to 12 figure range, really. I mean, it would have to be something astronomical, because of the fact that whoever it was able to engineer the collapse of Terra and short Bitcoin, most likely at the same time, making a killing. That's hypothesized on my end, but it's sure what it looks like from the outside. Regulators are very keen on stopping this from happening again. With that collapse of Terra, related to that, there were a ton of, like you said, we saw CeFi and DeFi platforms that were heavily invested in Terra, or had that heavily on their books. You had the Three Arrows Capital, you had Voyager, you had Celsius, you had, BlockFi, you had all these companies that were in there. Binance was as well, but they were able to weather the storm because they have tremendous reserves. And what happened was that domino effect, where we really saw, the second triggering of the second half of this downturn, where we went from about 31K Bitcoin down to about 20, under 20. That was a catalyst for it. Now, yeah, regulators, especially in the US, pick up on these things immediately. They're not dumb. They may be misinformed, but they're not dumb. And they point fingers and say, this is why we need more regulation. This is why we need more oversight. And in some cases, they're not wrong. I'm not for over-regulation. I'm for sensible regulation of this asset class so that it can be mainstream adopted. What's his name? Gosh, I can't remember. FTX. Sam, whatever his last name is, I can't remember.
Sam Bankman-Fried.
Thank you. He did his best at bailing everybody out, because he understands the value of this asset class and what it means to FTX as an exchange. And he even offered to engineer deals to acquire some of these companies, which were met with varying degrees of pushback, resistance, or acquiescence. But what we are going to see in this next bull run is other companies step up and fill the holes that were left by BlockFi, by Celsius, by Voyager, by companies of this nature that have all filed for Chapter 11. And we're going to see a more compliant voluntarily compliant, because these regulations won't be in effect by then, and a more structured and transparent, which is important to the overall community, because a lot of crypto traders feel very disenfranchised right now, since their favorite crypto exchanges that they trusted with their capital have, basically seized it and not allowed them to withdraw, or have told them that they may not get it back. It's right in their terms and conditions, which nobody reads, but should read. Please be very careful in reading the terms and conditions for a platform. For example, by contrast, we are, as a Binance Cloud exchange, we are covered by the Binance Insurance Fund, and we won't, if a hack happens, we refund our users. It's very different. If an event happens like this, our users are covered, and it's one of these things that it's exchange by exchange, but people are now realizing how careful they have to be in the wake of this, and we are going to see a reshuffling in the industry, where the leaders are really coming out on top, the Binances, the FTXs of the world, and are getting an even bigger market share. But it's also an opportunity for new exchanges and new players to step into those roles and fill it with a more transparent, more comprehensive, exchange or platform with more oversight.
Amen. Irina?
Yes, yeah, the regulations are definitely coming, because which regulator would miss this a wonderful opportunity to make a point, whether it's a political point where the regulators are elected, or whether it's a professional point, right, where you can move up in the ranks. So I'm that skeptical towards regulators. So of course they will move in, and of course they'll try to regulate. But the thing is, I don't believe there will be sensible regulation. There will be an over-regulation, there will be an overreaction, and what is happening in Europe right now. And it is what it is, right? Everybody has to sort of make a point, whether it's a political point or a professional point. So unfortunately, that is coming. Nothing we can do about that. With regards to Luna itself, I have a slightly different angle or slightly different view. I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. So for me, if it's some sort of other coin, I look at it in the same way you would look at sushi at 7-Eleven, right? You would look at it with a lot of suspicion. You will look at it with a lot of sort of, and you will think 3 times before you buy something from your local convenience store, which, has the possibility to physically poison you. So this is how Bitcoin Max is, how we look at all sorts of shit coins, for the lack of a better term. So and we do need this cleansing, because it was just getting a bit ridiculous with all those cowboys, flying a bit too close to the sun, and then people got burned, and then everybody was crying, look at us. And that's what happens as well when things are good, and when it's a bull market, we want the regulators to stay away. But the second people are starting to get burned because they're just these really, really stupid things, who on earth locks their hard-earned Bitcoin at 20% sort of return per year? Who does that? You have to ask yourself, where is this 20% coming from? And the answer is never good. The answer is never good. But if you don't ask, then you sort of close your eyes at that, and then when you lose your hard-earned money, then of course you go run to a regulator to complain about these injustices that are happening to you. So there's 2 things, right? Some people did deserve that because they were just too cavalier with their hard-earned money, but of course there were a lot of retail investors who got hurt, and of course the regulators will step in to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. But I'm afraid that their step in will be in a way that we do not have another Celsius to start with, rather than that we have a sensible sort of regulated crypto lending. Let's see.
Indeed. And I do hope that we can strike a balance. Irina, Joe, I am curious to know in what ways you've seen the crypto legal landscape change since you started practicing, and for example, taking an interest, or excuse me, taking a security interest in crypto assets.
Oh man, I started in 2015. Little context there. There was what, about 30, 40 tokens in 2015, and companies were just starting to scratch the surface of what was doable with crypto and what functionalities it could serve, and what use cases there were. Now we see this landscape that is just so overarching and really creative, interesting, innovative functionality, right? With different legal parameters around nearly every use case of a token. I mean, there are tokens that function in that can function like a security, like a utility, and like a commodity at different times, right? That was never the case back in the day. So what I've seen over the last 7 years is just I mean, it's not just legal. It's really what developers and what companies can put out into the space in an extraordinarily short amount of time. And it's definitely a shout out to developers that are innovative and full stack, front end, back end developers are incredible now, what they can do as compared to like even 7-8 years ago. But legally, it's slow to catch up because, I mean, for God's sakes, I've been doing this for 7-8 years, and sometimes I see some stuff that I have to read 3 or 4 times just to understand and grasp. Whereas, your average white paper back in 2014, 15, 16 was, plain vanilla compared to what it is now. And for companies that my law firm works with or advises for or structures arrays for, the parameters have changed so much that it's barely recognizable from when I first started in the industry, and there's so much more to worry about. In 2015, 2016, it really was the Wild West. There was no oversight from, or limited oversight from the SEC, CFTC, IRS even. I mean, there was, you could kind of just do what you wanted to do. Then the ICO craze of 16 and 17 happened, 17 and 18 really, and there were so many bad actors in the industry. I mean, we all remember these ICO white papers with 15 different pictures of Ryan Gosling on, as a team. And it was raising millions of dollars. It made no sense. So we've seen a legal structure be put in place and a lot of precedent be put in place, over the last 4 or 5 years that has really shifted the landscape and made it a more, a more inviting and easier to comprehend on one on one aspect game, but it's still difficult because the use cases, like I was saying before, have developed so much. So it's really a yin and a yang. I mean, it's tough. It's unrecognizable from when I started.
Yes, I can echo that as well. I learned about Bitcoin in 2011 from that oil and gas company that I mentioned. If you come from the oil and gas industry, or you know a little bit about that, you would know that each oil and gas company has huge servers, and those servers are used to process well data. So a couple of really young and really curious IT support individuals were using huge company servers to mine Bitcoin. And at that time, we had Arab Spring in 2011, January, February, we had Arab Spring. So we did not have any well data to process, although the servers were operating at full capacity. So internal investigation was launched, what on earth is happening, and then the company learned that those IT guys are mining Bitcoin. So that's how I learned about Bitcoin. I read the white paper because I was curious, what is it that they're doing there? Because doing something risky like this to lose your very, very cushy job. So I read the white paper. I completely dismissed it. I thought there's no way in hell any government will allow peer-to-peer cash being operated alongside the national currencies. But what I did not understand is the network effect. I did not appreciate that Bitcoin will become so big and so unstoppable so quickly that no government now can ban it, can stop it. I mean, look at China. China is banning Bitcoin every other year, right? And if you ever worked in China, you would know the minute you land, and I did a lot of work in China. The minute you land, you cannot access Google Maps, you cannot access Twitter and all the other sort of, wonderful sort of like Facebook and Instagram, because they banned it. And they had to ban it only once, whereas Bitcoin, they have to ban every other year. So banning doesn't work. And then in 2015, I was general counsel for Maersk. Maersk is the largest shipping group in the world, and they were the first corporation that started experimenting with blockchain, and they tried to put shipping on blockchain, and that project is still around. It's called Hyperlens. It's still around, although because it's built on Hyperledger, and we all know that permissioned blockchains don't work, and so basically the project is still around, but it's nothing much is happening. So that allowed me to see, okay, so there is a future use of blockchain for other things. And I was, at some point in my career, I was quite bullish about tokenizing real estate, tokenizing. You all know the tallest building in Dubai called Burj Khalifa. So there were several projects by various parties trying to tokenize Burj Khalifa, including the owners of Burj Khalifa, Emaar, the developer of Burj Khalifa. So, and I was so bullish. I was really believing that everything and anything will be tokenized, stored on blockchain, and transacted on blockchain. And now I went back to my Bitcoin maxi senses. I'm glad I got to my senses, and I kind of, a bit skeptical, for the lack of a better term, of tokenization of everything. So let's get Bitcoin right, let's get that right, and then we can move on to tokenizing everything else in the world. But yeah, 2017 was crazy times. Something like 95% of those ICOs turned out to be scams, which is actually very, very bad for the industry. And then it took, almost 3 years to cleanse, the industry took to cleanse itself from this nonsense. Let's see how many years we will need this time to cleanse ourselves from Celsius and 3 Arrow Capital, and this sort of wave of very risky and irresponsible behavior.
Couldn't agree more, Irina. And on that note, I would love for you to just, both of you, share your thoughts on how long it will take to cleanse kind of the fiascos that we've seen unfold over the last year. Obviously, we were in quite a rough crypto winter starting sometime in 2018 and really going through DeFi summer and the end of 2020. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think it's going to last as long as last time, or do you think that we'll be quicker to bounce back just because of how the global perception around the space and the space itself has matured so much?
Sure. I think it's going to be a shorter cycle, shorter downturn. And that's, of course, dependent on global events such as, wars, such as supply chain shortages, just, regular economic factors as well. See, there's a difference in 2017, 2018. Crypto was not as tied in with legacy finance and legacy economics, so to speak, as it is now. We see a lot more companies investing heavily in crypto on their books, and carrying balance sheets, like I was talking about before, that have in part different crypto. With that comes more stabilization of the industry, and I think that will help the industry as a whole weather this a lot better. I mean, we saw crypto briefly dip below 20K. Coming from where I'm coming from when I first got in, that's great, right? It's scary to someone that's a market participant in their first cycle, but this is typical. We see this, parabolic run up, then we see a 60 to 70% downturn, then we see another parabolic run up. I mean, that's happened over and over and over again. I think, just the other day, Binance bought 100,000 plus Bitcoin, right off the market, and started offering free Bitcoin trading. Purchases like that, by big companies that are storing the assets that are, in it for the long term. Granted, Binance is the number one exchange in the world, so they're in it for the long term. But we're seeing more and more of these votes of confidence, so to speak, in the industry and in the structural integrity of the industry over the long haul. So I think that's going to shorten the time frame for our crypto winter, and I expect us to be coming out of it, a lot sooner than we did in 2017 through late 2019, early 2020. So
when is a lot sooner? Give us a date.
I think 6 to 12. I think 6 to 12 months. I think by the end of the year we'll see back seeing mid-30s for crypto, for Bitcoin rather, and I think next year we'll be seeing pushes back into the 40 and 50,000 range, and if not above, especially moving closer to halving. I think we'll be seeing, conservatively, quite honestly, just my prediction, not financial advice. I gotta say that as a lawyer. I think we're going to be seeing six-figure Bitcoin by before the halving.
Well, I'm not as optimistic as Joe. I actually think this time it will take longer because this time so many more people got injured at quite larger scales. And also, we've got so many other events happening. For example, Europe, the heating and the gas the bill for an average person has doubled. Then I'm looking at the Middle East. Countries like wealthy countries like Lebanese and in general were quite wealthy individuals. They are broke through the actions of their governments. Then we're looking what's happening with Eastern Europe, for example. The adoption of crypto, like official adoption of crypto by Eastern Europeans in Ukraine, the official numbers is like 20%. In Russia, the official numbers are 15%. But I think unofficial numbers are at least 2 or 3 times larger. And look what's happening in Eastern Europe. Look what's happening in Serbia with Kosovo. Look what's happening with Nancy Pelosi traveling to the US, traveling to Taiwan and raising all sorts of armed exercises by China. So I'm actually, when it comes to geopolitics and when it comes to sort of like things on the ground, it is not looking good at all. And where would this in order for Bitcoin to go from what it is now, let's say 20s to 30s, how many billions of extra free cash need to move into Bitcoin? How many? Probably 300 billion, 400 billion. And where will those money come from? Will they come from institutional investors? Will they come from retail? Will they come from pension funds? Will they come from Saudis? I do not see where they will come from. So that's why I'm kind of thinking that we are quite for a long winter here, at least until the next halving when things will start looking up. Overall and long term, I'm very, very bullish on Bitcoin, super bullish. And, I believe in my lifetime, I will see it, $500,000 in my lifetime. And I'm an old lady already, so that's quite soon. But I do not think that we are in for an easy ride, especially with the winter coming, especially with the food shortages coming, especially with all that nonsense happening around, taxing more people in the name of climate change. So I think geopolitically and sort of economically, things are not looking good at all.
Well, I love the contrast in each of your respective answers. I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. Irina, I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I am curious to know one last thing. How much of what's happening geopolitically and what people are anticipating with terms of global recession and war and all the other things that you mentioned, how much of that do you think is already baked into market prices, whether it's crypto or stocks?
I know nothing about stocks, so I cannot comment on that. But I don't think that is baked in, and I'll tell you why. Because in order for Bitcoin prices to move up, free cash need to come in. It's, supply and demand, very easy. And my question is, and again, I'm not professing to be a trading expert. I don't trade at all. I just hodl. I think that's the safest bet. So my question is always, where will this free cash come from? If there is a great answer where this cash will come from, then I'm all in for Bitcoin going to 100K this year. I'm all for it, believe me. But I just do not see where this free cash will come from. So, and also people are quite concerned for the lives of their families, for their personal sort of safety, and also they're quite concerned how they will like, for example, Germany. Germany, and we're in August, Germany is already spending the oil and gas reserves that they had saved for winter. So what the hell are they going to do in the winter, right? So, and Germany is quite a wealthy country, is one of the wealthiest European countries. So if an average German cannot afford to heat their house, you think they will afford to go buy some Bitcoin? I think that will be, the least of their concerns. So this is all I'm just saying, without sort of speculating on the prices. I'm just sort of thinking, looking what's happening on the ground.
Right on. Thank you for elaborating. Yep. Go ahead, Joe. Of course.
A little bit. I just want to make sure that everybody got it right. I only think Bitcoin is going to be in the mid 30s this year by the end of the year. I think I was saying mid 30s, low 40s possibly, but I think it's going to move up closer to halving. So I definitely agree with that point of view. I don't think it's, and I really do think it's going to be 6 to 12 months before it, pushes out of there. But I think it's just a slow and steady climb because I think everything is more priced in than I think Irina does. So, unless there's more to come that's really catastrophic and we see another complete collapse of other first world countries, I think that we're decently priced in right now. But that's just my own view on it.
And I am hoping that you're correct. I am all with you in my hopes and in spirit. I hope that you're correct.
I think we all hope that Joe is correct. Irina, Joe, moving on, I would love to know more about your thoughts on Tether and their $41 million fine by the CFTC for not accurately reporting their dollar reserves. And to add to that, hypothetically speaking, what would a collapse of Tether mean for the industry?
We kind of knew this was coming. There were a lot of different audits done at different points with Tether, and they were kind of a little murky about what their reserves were. Now, let's talk about a collapse of Tether. To engineer a collapse of an $80 to $90 billion asset, financial institutions would need hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars backing it to effectively collapse it. I don't think that it's a gamble that most institutions, if any, or governments are willing to take. That's my personal view on that. So I really don't think a collapse of Tether is going to occur, because there has to be so much, so much engineering on a global scale to collapse Tether properly and not let it get back up off the mat and resuscitate itself. Remember, Tether's been under attack before when it first came out. I think it was 2017, 2018, and it rebounded in a matter of minutes, if not hours, with a much smaller market cap. Now, if Tether somehow does collapse, I think it's disastrous for the industry. We all know that. It's the number one stablecoin in terms of use. Obviously, its role would be filled by others. I'm sure BUSD, USDC would step up and be utilized. But that is a type of black swan event that, would, of course, exacerbate our crypto winter and make it more towards really what Irina was hinting at, and would just be, indescribably awful for our industry. So, that's where I sit on that.
Cool. And what are some of the biggest legal challenges? And we've probably touched on this a bit in the course of the AMA, but what do you think some of the biggest legal challenges facing the industry are at the moment. And obviously, this varies country by country, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but would love to hear just your high-level thoughts.
I think uncertainty for entrepreneurs is quite detrimental to the development of the industry, and also uncertainty for investors, it's quite detrimental. Think about that. If you're starting a business, would you want to be starting it in a very risky area where any regulator can come and start, causing you trouble? And it's so hard for you to raise capital because investors, so few investors are investing in the space because of that regulatory uncertainty. So uncertainty is actually quite bad. I'm all for jurisdictional arbitrage. I'm all for that. If you can't do something in US, do it in Switzerland. I'm all for that. But it's just that uncertainty that prevents the flow of investments, that prevents really, really smart people building, because why would you be dedicating your time if somebody can come and take it away from you? So the more certainty we have, the better it is for entrepreneurs, it's better for industry, it's better for investors. And I think that's the most challenge that I see in going forward.
Irina, Joe, what are your thoughts on XRP? And do you think that all this drama will eventually be sorted out with the SEC?
Yes. And yeah, it's a wonderful global financial system that works properly in almost every country except the US, right? Most countries have declared it not a security already. They use it for payment processing. It's fast. It's very efficient. It's basically feeless. And I've had a unique insight into it, having dated and currently with a pretty large media figure for XRP. And I've learned a lot about it from, just researching and building my knowledge base around some of its leadership and, very knowledgeable actors in the industry or users in the industry. I do think that once this case shakes out and settles, it will be a very good thing for the crypto industry because there's a lot of uncertainty around payment processing and transactional tokens right now. And everybody's kind of holding their breath, waiting to see how this shakes out. Now, I think the SEC's backed themselves into a corner because of their stubbornness with this case in particular, and the outcome will not be good for them. It may settle on its face, right? Because everybody might want to just kind of get it done and move on. But the SEC certainly is not going to have a clear victory here. And, quite honestly, it depends how hard, Ripple Labs leadership wants to push it. If they really want to push it and set precedent, which looks like they're doing here, instead of just settling, they've been given the opportunity to settle and they've declined. I think it could be very beneficial for crypto participants and crypto companies in the US, especially if, the case shakes out in their favor. Now, I understand why they're willing to take that risk because they have plenty of money behind them. And their best offer they've gotten is $100 million plus settlement thus far from the SEC. So I don't think that's a starting point for them. Now, of course, it could turn badly if things go awry and a judge, flips the other way. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this case shakes out because it is a defining seminal case of how crypto is going to be viewed for transactional purposes in the US, and we'll have ripple effects, pun intended, globally.
So before talking about the case, let me tell you my thoughts and feelings towards XRP. I think it's a pyramid scheme, I think it's a scam, and I think they should be shut down and the leadership needs to go to prison for a very, very, very long time. And I'll tell you why. It's a 100% pre-mined coin, and the leadership, so-called leadership, is dumping their coins on retail investors through liars on YouTube who are pumping the coin. They're paying, XRP are paying for partnership contracts with banks and they are paying to sort of promote to give this to give this media sort of sound bites to YouTube shillers, and giving an opportunity to dump more on the retail. Of course, that is my thoughts and my feelings as I described. And I really, so that's my thoughts and feelings on XRP. But those are thoughts and feelings on any other coin where the leadership is dumping their coin on retail investors. I cannot stand that as a general principle. With regards to this particular case, I'm not privy to that. I am not privy to the settlement negotiations that are happening. And I hope that SEC will dig their heels and will really make it as painful for Ripple and XRP as possible. But of course, there is another point here. There's a lot of retail investor money involved, and I would absolutely hate to see those people losing their investments. I would absolutely hate to see that. But then again, as I always say, a fool parts with their money quite easily, and we see a lot of fools that are going into XRP. Why they're doing that? Why they're not spending more time investigating what a pre-mine is? Why they're not spending more time investigating how all these contracts with the central banks are being executed? That I do not know. But then again, there is a lesson for everybody involved, and more education need to happen. So that's my love for Ripple.
And that's fair. That's fair. I think a lot of the I think a lot of the XRP holders do understand. They really do. They've been in it for a while. They do understand the pre-mine, and they do understand that the leadership sells on a daily basis, as was contracted for. When there was the very public leadership split. But I also do, and I also do think they understand that they are signing with banks because XRP is trying to position itself as a global payment processor that will replace, your Square, your Circle, your whatever shape you want to call it these days, for payment processing. And to do that, they do have to, they do have to become a little more, and I know they're going to hate this, but they do have to become a little more centralized and, coexist with banks and centralized central banks. And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing because guess what? I mean, I'd rather have XRP in place than a CBDC any day. And I think we all can agree on that, at least at that point, at least. So, it's a unity thing there, but I do think, like was shown here, and I stay pretty neutral on it because I've done a lot of research both ways on it, and not gonna lie, I used to hate it too. I've softened my stance on that, but you see people that come out that either love it or hate it. And there really is not a lot of in between. And it's one of the most divisive tokens in the space. And it has been for a very long time. So I think that's, being shown to be apparent on this. And I think that's kind of a cool back and forth and a cool contrasting viewpoint, for that question. So thank you.
Irina, Joe, I would love to hear your thoughts on money laundering in the space. I read, according to chain analysis, that criminal entities made 2.8 billion in Bitcoin transactions, a number that continues to rise each year. Do you foresee this having a major stunt on the industry, especially as this number continues to grow as the space continues to mature?
I think they were referring to rug pulls and hacks, right? They were not referring to money laundering specifically, because if you want to money launder, cash is, still the best money laundering tool. I am quite so there's reports after reports that come out that show that drug cartels, they're using cash and all of that, and very little money laundering as such happening through crypto. But yes, they unfortunately right now, as we're seeing in the recent events, the hackers are the only one that are making money in the crypto space right now, and the traders and the retail investors are getting, while retail investors are getting wrecked. So yes, a lot of that is happening. But I would be quite skeptical that I would not be too worried about money laundering in crypto. But then again, it's not my job to worry about money laundering in crypto. I have plenty of other things to worry about. It's the central bank's jobs to do that, and tools like snitches, as we call them, like chain analysis. It's their job to sort of snitch on crypto transactions.
Yeah, let me. So let's take for example that 2.6 billion was transacted in over the last year, right? We've had a market cap as high as almost 3 trillion, right? 3 trillion plus. What percentage of that? Divide 2.6 billion by 3 trillion. Is it 0.01%? Basically, a little less than. That's going to happen in any industry, and cash more so, right? Hell, there's more money laundering through regular bank accounts, and more, just, I guess, inappropriate behavior. I mean, we see bank after bank internally with either dirty money covering it up or, doing things that are completely illegal. Wells Fargo's been fined billions and billions of dollars for illegal, internal illegal policies. We just saw a U.S. bank have that happen to them as well. Chase has been fined by the SEC and by these watchdog institutions. So we see it happening all over the place. Obviously, we all know the legacy of international banks that have facilitated drug laundering depending on region, or money laundering through drug cartels, rather, depending on region. So it's not a new phenomenon. And of course, there's going to be some minute percentage of assets that are accessed by, bad actors in the space. Now, if it was $200 billion in a $1 trillion asset class, I'd be worried, right? We're not seeing that anywhere near that at all. And I do think, hackers make up for a large percentage of that, like you were saying. Also, if you're going to money launder in this industry, you're not going to do it with Bitcoin. You're going to do it with ZEC. You're going to do it with Monero. You're going to do it with, privacy tokens where you really can't be tracked for the most part, unless you're really dumb about it. So I think it's very overblown. I think the percentages bear out that it's not a significant percentage of the industry transactional history or industry transactions that occur. And I think it's something that it's going to not be significant moving forward as we get more and more institutions, more and more retail investors in, and just more and more mass adoption.
So we talked about this a bit earlier in the AMA, but what are your thoughts on not just China and Russia banning crypto, but other countries in the future coming out and quote unquote banning crypto? Do you think that over time the market will react less and less to these sorts of announcements? I mean, that's what I think, because I remember when China banned crypto in 2017, the market dumped big, and then it banned crypto sometime last year, and the market just didn't care. It brushed it off. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I already think it is already irrelevant. Russia has banned Bitcoin payments within the country, and the market didn't even react at all. And Russia is one of the largest users of crypto. So I think that's becoming completely irrelevant. Large countries like US, and if there is a really, really sort of negative regulation comes out of SEC, that would affect crypto markets, but only because SEC likes to regulate and likes to enforce their authority over the companies located outside of the US. So SEC is not sort of limited by the borders of the US for whatever reason. They see themselves as the regulators of the world. So I think that would be detrimental. But any other country banning crypto, I think we're way past that stage in our industry development.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all priced in. I mean, the first couple of times we saw it, there was a shock value, right, where the market, but it was also a comparatively infinitesimal market, right? I mean, we were just in the billions, and I remember when it passed a billion market cap, we were all excited, jumping up and down for joy. But I mean, you know, with the stability of the market relatively in the trillions now, and the on again, off again nature of the same countries repetitively banning, unbanning, banning, unbanning for ostensibly for governmental, you know, for governmental, what's the right word? Opportunism is the right word. Where you know they get in low, they ban it from their citizens, they sell it high, they let their citizens trade again. It's just so like clockwork in a lot of these more authoritarian countries that we're priced in and we're kind of immune to it. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well.
Irina, Joe, you've both had quite lucrative careers, not just practicing law, but practicing law in this industry. And you both elaborated and given us insight on the landscape from state to state in Joe's experience, and country to country in Irina and Joe's experiences. So with that said, and we talked about this a bit earlier, but I would love to hear again your summarized thoughts of what you think will be the next catalyst, the next big catalyst that will allow for, or result in rather, a massive wave of money and capital into this industry.
I actually don't know. John, do you want to take that? I really do not know. I was thinking about that, and I do not know because I see, like as I mentioned, the geopolitics are getting worse and worse. The economic situation of an average person is getting worse and worse. You know, soon we will have the largest, most powerful country in Europe, Germany, not able to heat their homes. So I really do not see something cool happening that we will all start jumping into crypto. I mean, even Elon's tweeting don't work anymore, right? When he tweeted, "Oh, you know, we're buying Bitcoin," I was so excited, I was so happy. And now he can tweet whatever the hell he wants. I mean, we're not taking him seriously anymore. So I honestly do not know.
But just really quick, I wanted to push back on that. I'm thinking more long term. Irene, I remember you said that your mom, who is in her early 60s, if I'm not mistaken, might not be having a crypto wallet and buying Bitcoin, but your nephew, your 10-year-old nephew, will in fact be allocating a bit of his money, whether it's his birthday money, holiday money, to cryptocurrencies, to Bitcoin. So while I'm not really trying to get an answer with respect to the immediate future, I was more curious in understanding what you think a major catalyst would be, let's say 10 years down the line. That's kind of more of what I was trying to garnish.
Yeah, maybe, you know, the digitally native kids growing up and getting a job if they're not priced out of the markets by all those metaverse jobs, right? What's happening with Axie Infinity, for example, is absolutely horrendous. If they have any money left, then they can allocate to crypto. But in general, I'm quite, you know, I'm quite pessimistic on the future. Economic future.
And I think that's fair, especially for the near term. But I'm more counterbalanced with that with our digital kids coming up. I mean, you know, we see kids out there that are, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 creating NFTs and earning crypto for them, you know, selling them. And obviously, we know that that's just iteration number one of NFTs, because NFTs, what are they really? They're supposed to be a digital representation of a physical asset, and that's what they're going to be used for in the future, to back real goods and real services. But, you know, getting kids in early, I mean, shoot, my best friend in Minnesota has got an 8-year-old that mines Ethereum with a 3090 on his computer, and he makes, you know, like $3-4 a day, and he's thrilled. And he's 9 years old. There's a lot of kids out there like that are doing that, that are so glued in digitally, that they do play to earn games. They do all kinds of, PvP games that you can earn crypto on. I mean, there's just so many ways for kids to earn these days and kids to learn about crypto. And this is where I think education is crucial. That will counter, poor economic conditions and probably even teach them the value of saving and hodling an asset that is appreciable, for over the long term in bad economic conditions, because they're going to learn from previous generations' mistakes and the current economic climate, how valuable that is. So I think we're going to see a lot new retail users, a lot of new retail, traders, really hodlers most likely, but investors for sure over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's going to really boost the asset class as it moves towards mainstream adoption.
I share the sentiment, Joe, and again, as Irina said earlier, we all certainly hope you're right. I want to be cognizant of your time. I know you both took space out of your busy days to be with us today. Before you go, though, I do believe there might be a couple questions, one from my co-host, Glenn, and maybe a couple from our community members as well.
Okay, yeah, I did have a question, Noah. Thanks very much. It's been great having Irina and Joe here today. It's been an awesome talk. I was wondering, what Irina and Joe's thoughts were on the European Central Bank saying they're going to create a digital euro in 2026. The Bank of England said they're going to create a digital pound, whether they're going to build inflation into their ideas around that. I mean, they've had quantitative easing in the Western world for 14 years. Is fiat sort of, is this high inflation going to keep going up, and could it be the death of fiat, and we could see Lebanon happening in the Western world? And would that bring adoption? I mean, I know you were mentioning earlier on, Irina, about Lebanon, as they got high inflation before the hyperinflation. Does that bring money into crypto? Do people try and preserve the wealth by moving it into crypto as countries collapse? And could that, spur another spurt of people adopting crypto in the future if countries collapse with hyperinflation? I know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I couldn't think of what will make people move into crypto. Here's a great idea: more and more countries collapsing, more and more currencies collapsing, more and more fiat currencies collapsing, because fiat currency is structured to lose value. It's structured, it's built in such a way. Looking back to the earliest recorded history, every fiat currency ever issued went to zero. And the US dollar over the last, how many years, lost something like 98% of their purchasing value. And look what's happening with euro. Euro is an experiment, right? Whole bunch of countries that have very little to do with each other. They don't speak the same language. They don't have the same culture, and they don't have the same work ethics. I mean, look at the southern European countries and look at Germany sort of financing them. That's probably, if I were an average German, I would be very unhappy about that. And there's so many Germans are unhappy about financing Italy, for example. I love Italy. I absolutely adore it. It's literally like 1 hour drive from my home, and I spend all my time there. I absolutely love it. But an average German doesn't have the same feelings towards Italy, because they're feeling that they're financing them. So yeah, that's a great example, horrible example, quite dystopian example. But as more and more currencies collapse, more and more people, nationals of those countries, are moving into crypto. And in terms of the digital euro, CBDCs, a horrible idea, horrible dystopian idea. I think we can all agree on that. And I hope, and European Central Bank has been threatening us with a digital euro for a while, and the same as the UK Central Bank. And I will do everything in my power to lobby against that. But we all need to sort of come together and lobby against that horrible, horrible idea. I hope that didn't happen, but I know it will happen. And the way to stay out of that dystopian world is to, Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add to that because obviously I don't live in the EU. I do transact there with my exchange. And I do think, but I do think, we talked about CBDCs extensively earlier, and I think this is no different. You go digital, it's just a way to track. It's a way to control. It's a way to, kind of lock down and have more oversight. We know that. That's nothing new. And you made a great point about the euro. I remember when it came out, I was actually in Europe when the euro really just came out in 1999 or 2000. I was on an international music tour as a classical musician, but in high school, and it was one of those things where we were like, oh, we don't have to buy. It was great, for a high school kid, you can buy this euro and transact with it everywhere, and not buy every country's native currency. But of course, the downside of that is that's correct. There are countries financing other countries in the EU, really, kind of like the states do here with taxing. Some states finance other regions of the U.S. and other states in the U.S. with tax dollars, and it's just one of those things at their expense. And it's the downside that economies of scale are still going to be economies of scale. So at the end of the day, digital tracking, digital assets are, if they're centralized and they're under, and their main purpose is to track activity, under whatever guise it's created, not good.
Irina, Joe, thank you again for being with us this afternoon, or Irina, in your case, this evening. I certainly appreciate both your time, and I would love to have you guys on sometime in the future for another panel. Definitely keep in contact. And before you go, give us a quick recap of who you are and your vision for the future. It doesn't have to be too long, but would love for audience members that are just tuning in to kind of hear a summary of who we had join us today, and hopefully they go back and listen to this recording and get some fine education out of it.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And Joy, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I'm glad we agreed on a few things. And of course, we disagreed on a few other things, because otherwise that would be a bit suspicious if we didn't. So my name is Irina Heaver. I'm a lawyer based in Dubai and Switzerland. And I am a Bitcoin maxi. And if there's a couple of things I can impact on those who are listening, they're as follows. First of all, educate yourself. Education is very, very important, because once you know what you're doing, then you can do it with more confidence, right? And don't go into stupid sort of 20% per year sort of Bitcoin lending schemes, because that just does not make sense economically and numbers, right? Learn, educate yourself. Twitter is a great resource. I follow all the large Twitter accounts, and I learn so much from much smarter people than I am in the industry. So I would recommend that. And if once you feel more confident, once you jump into crypto, DCA into Bitcoin, and if you want to be a little bit adventurous, DCA into other sort of coins, maybe Ethereum. Support projects that you like. For example, if you're a gamer, learn about gaming projects in crypto, learn about metaverse projects in crypto, and support those projects. Support entrepreneurs, and I'm sure your audiences are all accomplished and in their areas. If, for example, somebody comes from a strong marketing background, get involved with supporting entrepreneurs that are building in this space, because there's such a huge shortage of qualified people who can work in crypto industry. It's just ridiculous. My practice is absolutely overwhelmed. I mean, I'm getting more emails trying to hire my firm more than I can answer. So, the lawyers out there, learn more about the crypto space, because entrepreneurs building in the space need all the help they can get, whether it's a professional services, whether it's marketing, whether it's investment, whether it's just advice from somebody more senior in the corporate world than they are, because we do have a lot of young people who are building, which is absolutely amazing. And I absolutely love the examples that Joe mentioned. 10-year-olds are mining Ethereum, and 15-year-olds are minting NFTs and making money out of that. That's just fantastic. That's great. And I'm all for young people jumping in. So if if you have kids, push them into that space as well. And be careful. Don't believe, act as if you are buying sushi at 7-Eleven. If it looks dodgy, if it doesn't smell right, just do not buy it, just do not take it. Put it back on the shelf and DCA into Bitcoin instead.
Amen.
That was
So,
great.
Ruben.
And, yeah. So, no, I'm gonna have to correct you. It's Reiben. It's okay, bud.
Joe Reiben, my apologies.
Yeah, all good, man. I'm just some guy that loves crypto. No, I'm kidding. I've been a lawyer in the space since 2015. Trading a little bit before that, and I kind of parlayed that into a very successful practice. Well, my own practice starting in 2015. Like Irina said, God, we have so many clients come through the door, and it's you got to pick and choose who you work with because of that. Really, that smell test. If it's a project that doesn't want to dox themselves, if it's a project that doesn't to file as a business somewhere, that's not for me, right, or for my firm. But we've helped a lot of projects grow from the ground up, all the way through ICO, seed round, if they're doing traditional funding, all that good stuff. And I work as a compliance, regulatory, and business and tax structuring attorney. The last few years, I've been in that respect, and it's been very interesting. Let's put it that way. It's just been very interesting to to work in this industry. I encourage everybody that has a passion for the industry and a vision for a project to do their research, link up with business and attorney advisors or legal advisors that can help your business, and help drive the space forward. Advocate for like Irina said, advocate for the area and the space that you're passionate about, and really dive in, educate yourself. Yes. Research projects you want to invest in, you want to trade those tokens, and just help the space grow. Be a positive influence in the space.
Irina, Joe, thank you again so much. That was awesome. I had a blast. Whale Coin Talk community, thank you for joining us for this special AMA into the world of crypto law. And always remember, everything that you hear on Whale Coin Talk is for educational purposes only. We never give any financial advice, so always do your own research and